Richard, let's talk about hummingbirds. One of my favorite things about summer is all the hummingbirds. So tell us a little bit about how to attract hummingbirds to our yards.
Well, certainly hummingbirds are a lot of people's very favorite birds, and they seem like they're so special because they're so small. But attracting hummingbirds is not terribly difficult. You just have to keep a few things in mind. They're coming through in the springtime, coming up from the south, Central America for the most part, coming across the Gulf on the east coast and just coming up through Mexico on the west coast and flooding up into the United States, central United States and up into Canada, in some cases all the way up into Alaska for the breeding season. They'll get up there, they'll mate and raise their young in those locations. So once they pass through, their mission at that time of year in the spring is get to the breeding grounds. So you may see in some of the southern states, especially a few as early as mid-March, and they're headed north in a big hurry. They may be headed for your backyard, depends on which particular bird it is. But they're going to move through, get to the breeding grounds, and set up the territory, wait for the females who will follow soon, late March into early April. They'll be moving through and a lot more, so you'll see a few more birds. They'll all settle down somewhere between early April and the end of April where they're supposed to be, all across, like I said, from the southern United States all the way up into Canada. Then the breeding starts and they start raising young. So if you've seen a little flurry of activity, you won't see any for a while because they've moved, they've spread out, they're not on the move. Then toward the end of August, end of July, you'll start seeing activity really increase. They're moving south and there's a lot more birds because they now had all their young, so there's twice, 3 times the number of birds. Their mission now is not hurry to the breeding grounds, but it's meander south, gain a lot of weight, so they can make the rest of the flight. So they'll eat a lot, they'll hang around a lot, and you'll see a lot more birds from, say, July down through September. And to attract them, you want to have nice feeders out there with clean, fresh nectar. And that's important, especially when it's sunny and hot, above 85 degrees. The nectar needs to be changed every 3 days, 4 days max. Just look at your feeder. If it's looking a little cloudy, the nectar doesn't look sparkling, crystal clear, change it. It's easy to do. And a little hint, I take the nectar and mix it up ahead of time in a large pitcher, put it in the refrigerator, then I don't have to mix it every time. If I look out there and the feeder's not crystal clear, just bring it in, rinse it with hot water real quick, pour the nectar, fresh nectar out of the refrigerator in there, cap it back up, hang it back out, done very quickly. The birds get fresh nectar. They're likely to hang around with fresh nectar. Keep a lot of feeders out, as many as you think you can handle, especially during the real rush in the late summer. And just keep 1 out or 2 out all year long. You won't have to change it as often because it'll be very cold outside. But some of the birds will be here in the wintertime. That used to be like, no, it would never happen. It does happen. And some birds actually spend the winter even in Georgia, Alabama, and some of Michigan. There have been reports, and all across the United States we've had reports of birds overwintering there, and they can survive, especially if they have a little help from a feeder.
So Richard, do you feed all through the winter?
Absolutely. I would never go without having a hummingbird feeder out in the wintertime. At the location I'm living now, I have not had a winter hummingbird that I've seen. In a location a few years ago, I was living at another location, maybe 15 miles away. I'd had 2 or 3 different hummingbirds in the wintertime. All 3, the ones that I saw and recorded, we actually trapped and banded or tagged 2 of them. They were rufous hummingbirds. That's the most common winter visitor in the southeast. Some places have them year-round. Western California areas have year-round birds, and some of the more southern areas in the United States have year-round birds. But if you're up in the central part of the United States, northeast, you still could see a few in the wintertime. They're rare because they've moved over there. It's unusual for them, but they may well survive. It's what that bird is supposed to be doing. So if you see one, call your local Audubon, your local birding club, and report it. And just tell them you have one. Someone may be interested in coming out there. There's a whole group of people who look for these birds and will come out and professionally, they have license from the federal government, they'll capture and they'll tag these birds for research. So if it comes back, you'll know it's the same bird for the tag, or if it's ever found anywhere, you can say, oh, this bird came from so-and-so. We know at least 2 years ago it was in this location. And that really helps for research. But hummingbirds are really neat. Put out your feeders, keep them clean, keep 1 out all year long.
They are really neat. And one of the things I found so fascinating is their migration. I think it was you that had told me that they actually, have a huge, body of water to cross over and that they can do it. I mean, how is that even possible?
I know we think of small as being delicate, but let me tell you, if you ever watch these birds carefully, some of these birds are very vicious. They will attack each other. I've seen them grab each other and fall to the ground while they're fighting. But they're just tough like a lot of other birds are. Don't be fooled by their little size. As far as the migration goes, a lot of the birds in the United States, there's about 20 species that we get in this country. Most of the eastern United States has one during the breeding season, that's the ruby throat. You get a little further west, you start picking up black chins and a lot of rufous and a few other species, especially to the southeast. But these birds will typically overwinter down in Central America, and when it comes time for the breeding season, they will migrate all the way up into here, maybe stopping in Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, New York, and keeping all the way up into Canada, we find them. And one of the neatest ones is we find these birds going all the way up into southern Alaska for the breeding season. And they'll make this trip from Central America to southern Alaska in one season. So when it's time for them to go back home, or when it's time to come up here, they've got a long way to go. There's an old song, long way to go and a short time to get there. So it's amazing that they can actually pull this off. Through the research of the banding I was talking about, we have learned that they will gain a lot of weight, up to maybe a lot of weight for a hummingbird. Maybe they'll approach 5 grams as migration time. By the time they get to where they're going, and we know that by catching them as they come into the United States on the southern coast, they're down to maybe 2.5 grams. That's a lot of body weight loss in a short period of time. But they build up this fuel, they can metabolize it very quickly for energy, and that's how they make some of these long flights. Some of them do actually cross the Gulf of Mexico nonstop.